and the mechanism of transport of secretion, excretion, filtration, reabsorption of electrolytes in nephron and different parts of the nephron. We'll talk about that, and we'll just touch upon those things. If we talk about the functions of the kidney, the main function is kidney is responsible for homeostatic function. What we mean by homeostatic function is maintaining the constancy in the internal environment, and without kidney we cannot maintain good balance of a regulation of all the electrolytes. We cannot maintain the acid-base status. We cannot maintain our volumes related to the extracellular, the intercellular fluid compartment. So the maintaining these volume is also important. We have to excrete a lot of substances because those substances are not always to be to remain in our body. It has to be excreted out. And those substances, we have either two major routes for excretion. The first route is the excretion by GI, and the second route is excretion by the kidney. So depending upon which substance is to be excreted by gastrointestinal tract and which substance to be excreted by the renal system, you have already done the biotransformation of the drugs, and the biotransformation of the drugs will tell you and will determine and will say about that how these functions, which route is needed for excretion of different metabolites, and that is the key is biotransformation of different substances which are taking place in our body. And then we'll talk about the hormones produced by the kidney. The most important hormone is what we talk about erythropoietin. You know the function of erythropoietin, why it is important, and it has usage. And people who are suffering from, you will learn that people who are suffering from renal failure, you have to give on a regular basis the erythropoietin to them, because on top of that, if people who are suffering from renal failure and they are of old age where erythropoiesis is not possible, then you have to give them erythropoietin on a regular basis in order to maintain the normal erythropoiesis needed for them in advanced and old ages. That is important. So transformation of cholecalciferol or 125 dihydroxycholecalciferol, which is the most active form of vitamin D, is taking place in the kidney, and it is the 1-alpha hydroxylase is needed, and which converts 25 hydroxycholecalciferol into 125 dihydroxycholecalciferol. You are aware of that. Degradation of different hormones, drugs, insulin, glucagon, and parathyroid hormones is important. And synthesis of different substances needed for the control of blood flow and excretion of different substances is important. And we'll talk about the effects of the vasoconstriction, substances produced for vasoconstriction and substances for vasodilatation, and how they are maintaining the normal regular balance of the urine formation and regulation of these electrolytes and acid-base status in the body. If you talk about the kidney, what is the weight of the one single kidney?
1 kilogram.
1 kilogram, one single kidney. 70 kg, a young adult male. 150 grams. One single kidney. So we have two kidneys, so about 300. This is sometimes they say that is 1% of the body weight, which is you can say that near about or less than that. The most important thing, this 1% body weight or 300 grams of individual kidney has got 20% of the cardiac output. Now this phenomena is very important. This 25% cardiac output gives this importance that this small structure has a lot of functions to perform, and that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given 20% of the cardiac output. What is the normal cardiac output? 5 liters, okay, per minute. 25%, 20% means
1 liter.
1 liter. This 1 liter goes to the kidney, both the kidneys, and this 1 liter is going there. 1 liter has, out of this 1 liter, if we remove the 400 volume of the cells present, WBC, RBC, and platelets, so 600 plasma is there. This 600 plasma is going to both the kidneys per minute. And this smallest structure is handling this such a large volume. And this out of this 600 ml of the plasma, again 20% is the amount which is filtered, and that 20% makes of 600 of 20% means 120 ml. So this 120 ml is filtered through that, and this out of this 120 ml, you can say that this is going to be filtered, and then finally what we talk about, that it will be there are 3 processes we'll talk about, and those 3 processes will be filtration, reabsorption, and secretion. So you can think that about 180 liters of the plasma is being supplied to the kidney in 24 hours, and out of this 178.5 liters of plasma is reabsorbed, and we are only excreting 1.5 liters of urine per day. And this normal, if you talk about the normal production of urine is from 500 ml per 24 hours to 3,500 ml. Any volume of urine which is less than 500 is oliguria. Any volume of urine which is above 3,500 ml is polyuria. Okay, so the normal range is between 500 ml to we can say 300 and 500 ml. But under normal conditions, we only excrete normally 1.5 liters of urine. Now, what the other thing, what is important? Slight increase in filtration, 5% increase in filtration would increase the urine production to 9 liters per day, and it is very difficult if we are exceeding this 9 liters per day. It would be difficult to attend the lecture, 50 minutes lecture with concentration if we are having this situation. This is the problem. The regulation of kidney ensures that all regulatory functions of the kidney ensure that this does not happen, and then we are maintaining our normal concentration of urine, production of urine, and excretion of urine. At the same time, we are maintaining the homeostatic function of the body with the help of the kidney. If you talk about the nephron is the unit, and this is we have 2 types of nephron. One is the juxtamedullary nephron and cortical nephron. This nephron, one single nephron, is made up of glomerulus and renal tubule. Glomerulus is if you talk about the renal artery goes into then it goes into the lobar artery, then it's lobular artery, then arcuate artery, and then it has further divisions you have already done in your anatomy. And then finally it makes the afferent arteriole. This afferent arteriole divides gives the capillary, and then makes the efferent arteriole. And then it again goes and makes the second set of capillaries, and this second set of capillaries again finds and then makes the vasa recta. Now what you need to understand is this glomerulus, the tuft of capillaries, is high pressure system, and this high pressure system is important, and it is handling. We have 1.1 million or 1.2 million nephrons in one kidney. So another kidney also has, normal kidney has 1 or 1.2 million nephrons. So we have collectively 2 or 2.4 million nephrons together. And think that 20% of the cardiac output is going to these blood vessels, these afferent arterioles, and they are so well equipped to handle this large volume of 180 liters per day, and they are able to do this process and make the formation fluid. So this is important. If you look at this, these two types of nephrons which are shown in this picture, one is the cortical nephron, the other is juxtamedullary nephron. The cortical nephrons, 85% of the nephron are cortical nephron. And then 15% of the nephron are the juxtamedullary nephron. And these nephrons they have different functions. If we look at the animals living in the desert conditions, they have more of the juxtamedullary nephron, and that is why more and more concentration of urine can be brought about. And if, for example, in the rats living in the desert, or if we talk about we can say the camels. Okay. The other important thing what you need to understand is this whole renal tubule is single cell renal tubule. It's lining a single cell. Different types of cells could be there, but they are all single line, and this single line is able to handle, be able to excrete, secrete, be able to reabsorb, and this reabsorption and secretion is better dealt with the single cell thickness. Okay. Then we have, if you look at the structure, we have the glomerulus, then this Malpighian capsule. Then we have the proximal convolute. Then we have the loop of Fenley, the descending limb, hairpin turn, and the ascending limb, and the thick ascending limb of loop of Fenley. And finally, if you see this tubule goes back to and in close proximity with the glomerulus here, and then it makes the distal convoluted tubule, and then finally it is converted and attached with the drain into the collecting duct, and then finally this collecting duct is in the cortex, and then medulla, and finally it goes to the renal calyces. Okay. If you look at the functional aspect, and look at the functional diagram, three important functions are taking place while we are making the urine. One is the filtration, which is glomerular filtration. Which is taking place here, which is the afferent artery, efferent artery, and then we have the tuft of capillaries, and this tuft of capillaries are single line capillaries, and this is also single line visceral and parietal layer. So you can see that this single line has, so all the urine being the plasma ultrafiltrate is filtered here, and this filtration is taking place, and this is what we call as glomerular filtration. This glomerular filtration, after filtration, there is a second process, which is the two other processes take place in the tubule. One is tubular reabsorption, and the other is tubular secretion. So then this ultrafiltrate, which is what is being formed here into the proximal tubule, is then there is reabsorption takes place, secretion takes place, and finally, out of this, we have whatever the amount of, we can say, out of 180 liters of plasma, only 178 liters, 78.5 liters of plasma is reabsorbed, and finally, only we can say 1.5 liters. Or if we talk about, we have just said that 120 ml of GFR, then out of this, if we just make it, for simple calculation, then 100 ml of GFR, out of this 100 ml, only 1 ml of urine is being formed, the rest is reabsorbed. So that is the most important thing, and that is how you have to understand. There are lots of things are taking place while we are doing the reabsorption, and while we are doing the secretion, we have to get rid of those antibiotics which is being excreted. We have to get rid of So sometimes we have to maintain the acid-base status, so we have to secrete or reabsorb hydrogenide or bicarbonate and all these things. Sometimes we have to, important metabolites which are needed, which we have to conserve them, so we are conserving the glucose, amino acids, and so on and so forth. And we have to excrete urine and uric acid. So this is in a nutshell, once these glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, tubular secretion is done, then finally whatever is left is nothing but the excreted urine, and that excreted urine is excreted out when. Now the renal circulation, and if you talk about the blood flow, this is what you need to understand here is this. Try to understand that this first set of capillaries, which is the glomerulus, this glomerulus is formed by the afferent arterioles, and then it is, after forming the glomerulus, we have efferent arterioles. These afferent arterioles are low resistance input pathways, whereas the efferent arterioles are high resistant output pathway. So because of this low resistance input, high resistance output, a great pressure is created into the glomerulus, and this great pressure is important, and this pressure is important in order to do the filtration, and that filtration is needed. But apart from this, suppose if the blood pressure, if the renal plasma flow, we want to calculate the renal plasma flow. So in order to calculate the renal plasma flow, we need to select a substance which is purely filtered but not reabsorbed and excreted. So that is the para-aminobutyric acid is the substance. And we can calculate the renal plasma flow by doing this method. Renal plasma flow is the amount of para-amino clearance of pH by divided by 1 minus hematocrit. While we are taking hematocrit, we are not using the volume of the cells present in the blood. So this is important, that this is one of the important things. Now the other thing what we have to focus here is this. Despite different changes in the blood pressure, in the mean arterial blood pressure, the plasma flow and or we can say GFR is always remains constant. Under physiological control, in the physiological control, the mean arterial pressure, if it is between 80 to 180, between these values, the GFR remains constant. And this constant GFR is because there is a mechanism, we call it auto-regulation, and this auto-regulation is important. We'll talk about that. And this is what we are talking about, auto-regulation. Before I move on to this and I'll talk about that, I just want to know what is mean arterial pressure. We have done your cardiovascular system. What is mean arterial pressure?
It's the difference between systolic and diastolic.
That is the pulse pressure.
It's the
1/3 times systolic pressure times 2/3 plus 2/3 times diastolic pressure.
I like that. This is the right definition. So why it is not this and why it is that? Why it is not 120? If my blood pressure is 120 over 80, systolic 120, diastolic 80. If my blood pressure is this, so what is why it is not 80 plus? Why it is not the arithmetical mean?
We spend most of our time in diastole.
Thank you very much. We spend most of the time in diastole, 2/3 of the time in diastole, 1/3 of the time in systole. So that's the reason we take. It is not the arithmetical mean. It is the mean for how long the blood pressure remains in diastole and for how long the blood pressure remains in systole. And there is another way of doing that. Is diastolic pressure plus 1/3 of the pulse pressure. Is also another formula for mean arterial pressure. Mean arterial pressure always remains under normal physiological condition. If you have blood pressure of 120 or 80, so mean arterial pressure always remains less than 100. Okay, this is 96 or 97 or something like that. But if the mean arterial pressure is 80 and 180, if the mean arterial pressure is 180, you can think that how much the systolic pressure would be and how much the diastolic pressure would be. It would be very high. Despite that, the mean arterial pressure is 180, but you can see this is the mean arterial pressure 80, this is the mean arterial pressure say 160 or 180. Despite the increase in the mean arterial pressure, the renal blood flow remains constant. This is the beauty. And this remains constant. It means if you increase the mean arterial pressure, it will not change the GFR. And if GFR is not changed, if otherwise any increase in the blood pressure would increase the GFR, and we are going to lose more and more, fluid. So that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this. So this window of control is autoregulatory, and this is because of the two theories. We call it myogenic theory and tubulo-globular feedback theory. This myogenic theory is what happens. The blood vessels which are in the we can say afferent arterioles, when the mean arterial pressure increases, there is stretch. The stretching will cause these are the smooth muscles. The smooth muscle stretch will increase the intercellular calcium and will cause reflex contraction of the smooth muscles. Then it will control the diameter and with which the blood is going into this, we can say glomerulus. So that is what we call as myogenic theory. Tubular feedback is important because this is the mechanism. Increase NaCl concentration. If you remember, we have discussed that there is the distal part, the distal convoluted tubule comes in close proximity with the glomerulus, and that is the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Those cells are very sensitive cells. They sense the amount of sodium there, and increased amount of sodium will definitely what they cause release of adenosine, and then adenosine causes vasoconstriction. That is another mechanism of controlling the autoregulation. So these two autoregulation is even despite the increase in the mean arterial pressure, the blood pressure or GFR is renal blood flow is maintained. If the renal blood flow is maintained, GFR is maintained. We are not, even if the blood pressure is high, we will not be excreting excess amount of urine under these because of these protective mechanisms. Whatever we are having in our body, it has to be cleared off. The plasma, we call it plasma clearance or renal clearance. Okay? So the clearance of the substances is whatever the substance which are completely removing per unit time, and that is what we call as the clearance formula. We do have clearance of different substances. Do we have clearance of glucose? Yes, we do clear glucose. Yes or no?
No.
We don't clear glucose.
No, it's zero.
In case of diabetes,
Because diabetes, because like we exceeded the limit, physiological limit, so we'll have it in your.
so it means it is. In case of diabetes, it is. It has to be. Now, what we need to understand is whatever we can calculate the clearance of substance by this formula. So, and this is the formula. X is the substance, whatever the substance we are calculating. So, is urinary concentration, is plasma concentration, and it's the volume. We have to, if we take in plasma volume, then we can easily understand and we can calculate the renal clearance. And this renal clearance is important in order to understand that, how the substance is being cleared from the plasma. Okay. GFR, glomerular filtration rate, is the indicator of renal function. If you want to know how the kidney is working, what we need to do is we need to calculate the GFR, and this GFR calculation is important. The ideal substance for measuring GFR is in urine is the fructose polymer, and this fructose polymer is so it has to be, when we talk about GFR, it has to be filtered,
Not reabsorbed.
Yes, and not
Secreted.
secreted and not secreted and reabsorbed. Okay, make sense? Now what we have to do, we can calculate the filtered in inulin and excreted inulin. If they are balanced, then we can calculate the GFR, and GFR is plasma concentration and urine concentration, and we talk about the urine flow rate, how much urine flow rate is there. So with the help of this, we can just rearrange the formula, we can calculate the GFR, and GFR can be calculated. And this GFR is nothing but the clearance of inulin, and this is how we talk about, we can calculate. Similarly, there is a substance creatine which is produced endogenously, and this is the one of the mechanism. If you want to calculate the GFR of a person, you just talk about the creatine clearance, and this creatine clearance is the indicator. It will tell you what is the state of the functional status of the person who is having the GFR, this GFR value in terms of the kidney function. Plasma creatine clearance. Despite, if you look at this, the plasma, we have this graph where we are talking about GFR liters per day, and this is how the normal GFR would be. And this is the plasma creatine concentration. If despite increase in plasma creatine concentration on the y-axis, if you see, the GFR is can be calculated. If the GFR is 90 liters per day, it means there is one kidney is functioning, one is not functioning, or there is one has been removed. If both the kidneys are normally functioning, then GFR will be 180. This is how we talk about it, and this is how we can calculate the plasma creatine concentration and estimation of the GFR. There is another, these days, what you have to do, if you just, once you go into your clinical practice, you just talk about the creatine clearance, and they will talk about that, how much creatine is being cleared, and based on to that, you can assess the kidney function of that person. So this is what you were talking about, the threshold. There is what is the difference? If you look at this, the threshold of glucose and transport maximum of the glucose. What is the difference between the two?
Threshold
Can
is
anybody explain? Yes, please.
Threshold is when you start getting glucose in the urine. Transport maximum is when every single transporter is occupied.
Threshold, can you repeat it again, please?
The threshold of glucose would be after which point it ends up in the urine.
Threshold, yes. Threshold is the plasma value of that substance at which it does not appear in urine.
The maximum plasma.
Yes. The maximum plasma level of that substance at which it does not appear, because that is all the threshold. Above that, it starts appearing in the urine. Okay? So that is how, if you look at this graph, so we have, so transport maximum means maximum all the secretion and absorption are taking place, and they are all the mechanisms are continuous, are being involved, and they are engaged, and then that is how, depending upon in certain conditions. So if you talk about if we have a plasma level of 220 of plasma glucose level, if of 220, this is the some books say 180, some books say 220. So this is the threshold for glucose. So if you have plasma glucose level of 220 ml per 100 per deciliter, glucose will not start appearing in urine. Beyond that, if it is there, then it may appear in the urine, and that is how what we call as transport maximum. So this is how, this is the way, as you increase the plasma glucose level, plasma concentration, then the amount of glucose is reabsorbed is here, and this is how we talk about the normal glucose concentration, and we talk about the limit of reabsorption, and that is how the mechanism TMG, transport maximum for glucose, is the concept. So you understand that this is one of the important concepts you need to know. if we talk about the globular structure and function, we know that the Bowman capsule or the urinary tubules are single line. This single line, then we have, this is the single line we call as the epithelium, and then we have the we can say the visceral layer of the Bowman capsule, which is the podocytes. The difference between, if you look at, if we just highlight this and if you increase this, and you can see that we look at the endothelium of the blood vessels, it is fenestrated, means they have fenestrations, they have opening. This is the peculiar characteristics of these endothelium, and it is about 80 to 90 nanometers pore size is there. And here, if you look at the basement membrane, the basement membrane is usually very thick, and it is always negatively charged. Basement membrane is always negatively charged, so it will not allow negatively charged substances, for example, plasma proteins. Okay, but it will only allow substances according to the size, and that sizes should be not the size of this fenestration, which is 80 to 90 nanometer, but it should be as per the size of the we can say as per the size of the as per the size of the podocytes. Between the podocytes there are slits, and these slits are only 60 nanometer. So this 60 nanometer is the size. So anything which is 80 to 90 nanometer may come, but it will not go from this. From the slits. So that is how, what you need to understand is we are controlling here with two mechanisms, because of the size and because of the charges. So plasma proteins cannot cross. We have albumin, globulin, and fibrinogen. The smallest protein is the albumin. Albumin is negative charge. Albumin can cross, but because of the negative charge, it does not cross. While globulin and fibrinogen are large proteins, so they cannot cross. This is what you need to understand and appreciate. Okay. We talk about the Starling forces here, and these Starling forces are the forces which favors filtration and which opposes filtration. And then the globular filtration rate, GFR, depends on the filtration pressure, okay, net filtration pressure, and net filtration pressure, and it depends on the net filtration pressure, and we'll see how the net filtration pressure is measured. This is the capillary pressure, which is 55 mmHg. Then we have here inside, there is a colloid osmotic pressure. Capillary pressure is favoring filtration, okay? The colloid osmotic pressure is against the filtration, because it is the plasma proteins which are holding water, so it will not allow, it is against the filtration. Then we have the hydrostatic pressure into the in the capsule, in the Bowman capsule, so which is minus 15. So what we see, plus 55 minus 30 is 25, 25 plus 25, and then again minus 15 is plus 10. So plus 10 is the net filtration pressure. The more the net filtration pressure, the more will be the GFR. And it also depends on the filtration coefficient, and filtration coefficient is nothing but the characteristics of the basement membrane and the hydration of the filterability of the basement membrane, how the basement membrane behaves, if it has, and then the thickness of the basement membrane, area of the basement membrane. These are the characteristics related to the basement membrane. So we can calculate the GFR if you know these values, and this is the simple way of calculating the GFR, and that is how, this theoretical way of doing that. In any angiotensin system, and if you know that the juxtaglomerular apparatus which comes into the, the part of the distal convoluted tubule which comes close to the glomerulus, it is responsible for, it senses the amount of sodium chloride which comes to it, and this sensation, so if there is a reduced renal blood pressure, it senses that. If there is reduced delivery of reduced solute delivery, means reduced NaCl concentration, it will sense that. If there is sympathetic stimulation, strong sympathetic stimulation, it will sense that, and based on to that, it will release the renin, and then renin will convert angiotensin 1 is converted into angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 goes to the liver with the angiotensin converting enzyme, converts into angiotensin 2, which is a very powerful vasoconstrictor. And that is how, because of this, it does not allow, so because of this vasoconstriction, it will not filter more amount of these substances, so more filtrate will not be going there, and that is how the mechanism of this renin angiotensin mechanism works. Okay, and it also releases aldosterone, and you know the mechanism in the collecting that aldosterone. What it does, it causes reabsorption of sodium and secretion of potassium, and that is how it is maintained. Tubular transport. The tubular transport, what is happening in the glomerulus is filtration. The rest of the tubules, they are only responsible for absorption, reabsorption and secretion. So this reabsorption and secretion is final modulation, how the final urine is being formed, and what substances should be present in the final urine after this remodulation of absorption and reabsorption and secretion. And that is how you need to understand, and there are different interplay of different hormones are there. So glomerular filtration, glomerulus is only responsible for filtration, proximal tubule is mainly for reabsorption, and loop of Henle is concentration, and distal tubule is reabsorption and secretion, and collecting that is also for reabsorption and secretion. Here, if we talk about excretion, reabsorption and secretion of hydrogen ion concentration. Here, if we talk about sodium concentration in the distal and collecting that. Here, if we talk about the angiotensin, arginine vasopressin, we talk about ATH hormone is in the collecting that. So these are the different hormones which are acting. This is in different parts of the nephron. If you just, let's take these sites one by one, and what happens in the proximal convoluted tubule? In the proximal convoluted tubule, the fluid which is being formed here is isoosmotic, the same osmotic concentration. Okay, and what is happening here? There is 67% or 70% of the salt is reabsorbed here. And this reabsorption is active at this sodium potassium pump on the basolateral side. So this is the basolateral side. We have sodium potassium pump here, and at the same time we have the glucose and amino acids and other substances are concentrated, and that is how. So these glucose is reabsorbed, sodium is reabsorbed. We have the sodium reabsorption, and finally this is going into the blood. And that is how we maintain we just take back all these substances here, okay? Please try to understand, these are we have the very tight junctions here, and this lateral spaces are there. So only transport which is taking place, the transportation is taking place only at the side of the basolateral and the apical sides. So this is what you need to understand. Isoosmotic, without in the cells are not there, it has phosphate, calcium and other electrolytes to reabsorb as needed depending upon the need of the body, but most of the time all the glucose and amino acids follow in the co-transport mechanism, and other substances are concentrated in the filtrate. In the proximal tubule, if you look at what is happening here in the proximal tubule, the substances So if you look at the graph, this graph is showing the tubular fluid plasma ultrafiltrate, and this is the percent of proximal tubular length. This is 20% length. By the time the ultrafiltrate passes the 100% length of the proximal tubule, there is a major reabsorption takes place and secretion takes place. Look at this. Any substance which is more than 1 means it is not reabsorbed, and any substance which is less than 1 means it is 100% reabsorbed. Look at the glucose and amino acids are reabsorbed by the time it reaches the 60% length of the proximal tubule. Okay, and similarly, of course, the chloride, urea, inulin, and pH are not reabsorbed here. But osmolarity of sodium potassium remains same. When it remains same, it means it is reabsorbed, and it follows water along with water. That's the reason it is always 1, considered as 1. So this is how we talk about proximal convoluted tubule. The proximal convoluted tubule, if you look at this, this is we have, substances. Look at this, say for example, in the tubular urine, in the blood, we have the sodium potassium ATPase pump is working here. We have the different metabolic products are being secreted here. You can see that in the tubular urine there is sodium is reabsorption, and there is also hydrogen is reabsorbed. So this is how what are the, and on the blood side these are the actively transported, and that is the most important thing that you have to do. And organic cation transporters are there, organic cations are there, and this is how you need to look at that. Loop of Henle. Descending part of the loop of Henle and ascending part of the loop of Henle. In descending part of the loop of Henle, what is happening? It is water permeable. So once it is, please try to understand. Two things are very important to know and to appreciate here. We can say the renal tubule, which is passing from the cortex into the medulla, and then there is a loop of Henle, and then goes back to the thick ascending limb, and finally goes to the again to the glomerulus and proximal distal convoluted tubule. Please try to understand. They are running into an interstitium present in the cortex, interstitium present in the medulla, and this interstitium are the cells present between these, we can say, these renal tubules. This interstitium is, as we go deep into the interstitium has a lot of increased, we can say, osmolarity, and this increased osmolarity has its value. There is one mechanism, what we call as the countercurrent exchange mechanism and countercurrent multiplier mechanism. Countercurrent exchange mechanism, the seat of countercurrent exchange mechanism is the vas erecta. What is happening here? It is at the cost of energy creating high osmolarity of the interstitium. While on the other hand, countercurrent multiplier is using this, and the seat of countercurrent multiplier is the loop of Henle, where with the help of this increased concentration of the interstitium, it is using that gradient, and when the fluid is moving in two different directions, that is the mechanism. Once the fluid is going down, it is water soluble, so water is water permeable, so water is coming out. So the concentration increases as it goes down. Once it comes up in the thick ascending limb, it is water impermeable, so the concentration again comes back to the close to or lower than the osmotic concentration of plasma. So this is the mechanism. What you need to understand, that at one side, two mechanisms are important: countercurrent exchange and countercurrent multiplier. Exchange is creating high osmolarity in the interstitium and multiply is using that because of the creation of this activity. If we do not create this high, we can say, if we do not create this high interstitial osmolarity, the multiplier will not work. So multiplier works only if it is exchange is created, and the exchange mechanism is creating at the cost of energy. So if there is no energy system, so this maintenance of this increased concentration of the interstitium, osmolarity, osmotic concentration of the interstitium cannot be maintained. This will contribute as we say that because the filtrate comes here, the filtrate is coming again back to the glomerulus, and this is how there are sensors, and the juxtaglomerular cells, they sense the amount of sodium chloride present into that, and that is how, based on to that, it maintains the concentration of the sodium there into that, and that is how. Finally, after the distal convoluted tubule, we have the cortical collecting duct, and this cortical collecting duct, there are two types of cells in the cortical collecting duct. Please try to understand. One type of cell is the principal cells, and the other type of cells are the intercalated cells. The principal cells are responsible for where the aldosterone works, and it is responsible for, when the aldosterone is there, for reabsorption of sodium. And this reabsorption of sodium takes place, and it is also excretion of potassium is there. Whereas intercalated cells are responsible. They have carbonic anhydrase enzyme, and this carbonic anhydrase enzyme makes the hydrogen and water, makes carbonic acid, and this carbonic acid dissociates into hydrogen and bicarbonate, and that is how, depending upon the acid-base maintenance, where there is acidity or alkalinity, acidosis or alkalosis, based on to that, we just get rid of those, we maintain the acid-base status. So that is how, what we need to understand is these two mechanisms are important. So this is the principal side of potassium secretion, and this principal side of potassium secretion acts because of the aldosterone, as we talked about. Collecting ducts, the arginine vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone comes and it attaches with the receptors, and once this receptor is there, it acts on G proteins, and G protein is making the pKa, and once the pKa protein kinase A, it converts, it forms the aquaporins, and aquaporins are inserted into the we can say the luminal wall, and this it causes reabsorption, and once the reabsorption will be there, it will conserve water, and then more and more water will not be going into it. So whatever under the effect of ADH, we are excreting concentrated fluid. If there is no ADH, then what happens? It will be diluted urine. And we have already discussed this ADH and concentration of urine. I just want to go into, I have already talked about this, exchange and multiplier. This is the slide I want to emphasize here. If you look at this, formation of, the purpose is, when we are fasting, in the after the suppose when we pass our urine early morning and midday, urine concentration is not that dark. The color, if you look at the color, and it is not that concentrated, it is more watery. At the end towards the end of the day, before the futur time, we pass concentrated urine. Why this change takes place? Although we are fasting, it is because In the early part, when there is excess amount of water, we are getting rid of water. When the body senses that there is no water being taken by the person, so it will try to conserve water. And at the end of the day, when you see that the volume of urine is also low, it is also very concentrated. So this mechanism of adjustment is all because of the ADH hormone. Formation of osmotically concentrated urine, what happens here? You can see that it is only possible because of the presence of antidiuretic hormone. If the antidiuretic hormone is not there, what will happen? Then we will have the more diluted urine. So that is how the formation of osmotically diluted urine is under the effect of, and you can see under the effect of this, you can see that there is no water reabsorption is taking place. Here we are making only 0.5 ml of urine. Here we are making 15 ml of urine. You can see the difference of this. Okay. That was the final. Three important processes are there: globular filtration, tubular reabsorption, tubular secretion, and different segments of the urinary tubule and action of different hormones over there. That is the interplay of all these things. Okay. Any questions? Do we have to take the attendance?
Yes.
Really?